Okay, John, this isn't really a news topic as such, but you wanted to get a shout out, as it were, for Euphoria 2, which you've put down on the sheet as being another 120 FPS banger. But more
Yeah,
to the point, it kind of dovetails slash segues into a DF Retro project that you're working on now.
that's right. DF Retro is coming back with a big episode. So yeah, Hebereke 2 slash Euphoria 2 came out recently. It is the first internally developed, well, I guess there was the Iki reboot thing, but it's the first like proper full internal Sunsoft game that these guys have done since they've revived themselves. Because if Sunsoft has they were a powerhouse in the 80s and some of the 90s, and they did a lot of stuff. They were especially known for the Batman games, of course, and other licensed properties, as well as just absolutely killer music and tech. But eventually they just kind of faded away. But the company itself, the Sun Electronics Corporation, or Sun Denshi, they never actually closed. Like, because this games were not their only business. They continued to do business, but in recent years they reopened development. Uh, and this is the game that they created there. And when I visited the HQ, I filmed a bunch of awesome footage. So the DF Retro episode I'm making is basically like a look at Sunsoft's history, where I'm walking from the very beginnings of Sunsoft in 1978 up until now to show like all the different periods, like the way they changed and shifted with the market, both the good and the bad, because there is a mix of both. And then eventually we get up to Hebereke 2, which is an
Mm-hmm.
awesome little platform game with a beautiful style that's sort of like a felt, it's like almost like Kirby's Epic Yarn, but like less like string based, I guess. I don't know. It's hard to describe. They use these little like those little plastic perler beads to do the text boxes, which I also love. They do like little pixel art renditions of the characters with perler beads, which looks really cool. But yeah,
Mm-hmm.
it is a sequel to the original Hebereke for Famicom, which also got a European release called Euphoria, the Saga, where they changed all the characters to look super weird, and they changed the main character to be called Bop Louie for some reason. Bop
As you
Louie does
do.
not return.
Okay.
It's just they actually have the original Japanese characters. But
So
what I
the
like
Western
about
name, sorry, the Western name is Euphoria the Saga 2, right?
yeah, or Euphoria 2, the Saga, or something like that. Yeah. Which that's the only thing they kept, thankfully, not none of the other localization
Right.
changes. uh, but the thing I wanted to point out about this game that's pertinent to DF is that it's one of the recent games that I've played where on the newer consoles they just like 120 FPS, let's do it, and that's what they did. So
Okay.
those versions all run at 120 frames per second, which is something I want to talk about when it comes up, because I think it's such an important feature, especially for a 2D platformer game. Like, it just makes it look so smooth and clean. We saw it with Ori and the Will of the Wisps, obviously. That was a great example of it. Penny's Big Breakaway, also 120 FPS, and this as well, 4K native, 120 frames per second, buttery smooth. If you like this sort of Famicom era Sunsoft stuff, I do recommend checking it out. But yeah, hopefully in this Sunsoft video, I can sort of walk everybody through the ups and downs of Sunsoft and maybe gain a deeper appreciation for what the game actually is and why it exists. Because, again, this never came out in the US, the original. So there's not going to be that nostalgia there. So it's something
Interesting.
that's going to take a little bit of context to understand, I think, which,
Hmm.
it's tricky these days, but I do think it's worth checking out.
But you actually visited Sunsoft in Japan for this.
Yeah. So not specifically, I at the time I wasn't sure what I would do with it, but yeah, I went to Sunsoft's office in Japan, the original building where Sunsoft made those games, and I was spending time in the office, the very office where all this stuff happened. They opened up their archive for me. I got all these cool flyers from them. Talked to lots of really cool people there, and just got a real sense of appreciation for their history, which I really enjoyed. And that's so there's a lot of B-roll and stuff and filmed footage and some stuff that we show that's never really been shown, at least not in any sort of detail. So there will be some cool stuff in there, including an arcade board that never actually got released and only one exists that we hooked up and played on. And I got to
Sounds a bit
film a little bit of that.
precarious.
Well, they were in the middle of trying to dump it, actually.
Right.
So they had it out at the time for that purpose. And it was like, oh yeah, we're working on this. Check it out, which was cool.
Oh. Any thoughts, Oliver? Anything to add?
I think it looks really cool. It reminds me of Yoshi's Crafted World, sort of. And
That's it. Yes.
yeah, just in terms of the way that they're trying to play with textures and shapes and the felts and the little pin things that John mentioned. I think it looks really cool, and it just looks like a nice little platformer that seems pretty breezy. Would you say, John?
Yeah, it's quite breezy. It's it's funny, comical. It's got absolutely killer music as well.
Yeah,
And
it just looks like a
120
cool
FPS,
game.
man. It's awesome.
Cool.
Yeah.
Of course, it runs like a dream on the Steam Deck as well, as you'd expect. So it's good on there. Switch version is the only one that's a little iffy. That is 60 FPS, but it does have dips. So could be better, could be worse. It's not bad on Switch necessarily. It's okay. It's just I'd much rather play any of the other versions so you get that really high frame rate.